Good evening. I'd like to call our Town of Sydney regular council meeting on Monday, March the 14th to order at 6 p.m. Good evening to members of the public who are watching the live web stream, and good evening to members of the public who are joining us in person in the council chamber this evening. The town is pleased to advise that effective today, our council chamber is open for in-person public attendance at council and committee of the whole meetings as before the pandemic. And wearing a mask is no longer required, and registering to attend in person is no longer required. And going forward, members of the public wishing to participate in meetings electronically via Zoom, and that would be to speak during a public participation opportunity, may continue to do so subject to advance registration, and we would ask that you register in advance by contacting the administration department prior to noon on the day of a meeting. Next, I'd like to move to our territorial acknowledgement and respectfully acknowledge that we're holding our meeting this evening in the territory of the Wasanich Nation. We express our gratitude to the Wasanich people for the stewardship of these lands for millennia, and that we strive to continue to partner with Wasanich people in the stewardship of these lands and continue to want to build our relationship, a government-to-government relationship. I did mean to comment during the opening about the COVID that this is the first meeting with all members of council attending in person. It's a pleasure to have us all together again, and we look forward to getting back to normal as well with members of the public in attendance. I'll next turn to approval of the agenda. We do have some additional items that were of correspondence that were received after the agenda was published last Thursday. Council has received these, and I'll just refer to them as a letter of correspondence from Mr. Moffat that will, with respect to item 12B, recommendation number 1. And we have 7 additional letters of correspondence regarding item 13A, the Rest Haven Dog Park. And that would be in addition to to all of the correspondence that was included in the agenda package. So I look for a motion to approve the agenda with those additional items.
I'll move the agenda as amended for approval.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? None opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. And we'll now turn to public participation. Our regular public participation provides the opportunity for members of the public to address council for up to 4 minutes. We have no speakers registered to speak to us this evening via Zoom. So I will open public participation in the chamber. If either of our guests would like to come forward, please give us your name and address. There is still the little button to turn the red light on and the microphone.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Janet Rook. I actually reside in North Saanich. My address is 10125 West Saanich Road, but my real life is at work, which is 10441 Rest Haven Drive, better known as CM Harbour Authority, the commercial fishing dock, which shares the land that we are talking and discussing about the dog park. So thank you for having the opportunity to speak. I have met in person with Mayor Smith, McNeil Smith, sorry, Councillors Fallett and Terry O'Keefe. And thank you. I was going to write a submission, but oh, you guys, I'm so busy at work. I work at arm's length with the government, and it's March Madness, so it's impossible for me to actually concentrate and have the time to write a letter. I got home from work today at 5:15 and looked at the agenda and went, 6 o'clock. So if my stomach's growling, you'll know why. Anyway, I do have some negatives and some positives, and I have actually gone through most of those with the mayor on a walkabout on Friday afternoon, as well as the 2 councillors I spoke of. And have had a lot of public input, being that I have my office building there in the park, and there's a lot of misconception as to actually who owns what as far as the facilities in the park. So I just wanted to give a little bit of background to those that may not know that as of yet. I know it's going to be on discussion later, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say and deliberate. Just a bit of a background, I started the position in 1998, so for 23 years now, I'm in my 24th year. very familiar with everything that goes on in that park, the usage of it, including pedestrians, birds, and dogs, and just the general public and coming and inquiring about the facility and what we have to offer. We do offer fresh seafood, and it is growing on a weekly basis and bringing in a lot of public attention, which is fantastic. We all want fresh, real food, especially seafood, at a reasonable cost. So also, though, on that note, I did receive the survey last November, I believe that was, and I think I filled it out, but in all honesty, I can't remember. And I kind of let it go and let's just hear what the people had to say. I felt that I don't vote in Sydney, but I do work there every day. So mostly I saw in the last couple of months was a huge increase in actual visitors coming with their dogs, and I'm assuming they're testing out the park and becoming familiar with the area, which made me think, okay, this is going to be an issue with parking. So we currently, on any given day right now, it looks great. There's lots of parking available, but that will change in about 2 weeks. And then we'll be in our high season and continue to be like that for the next 6 months. We have 4 visitors parking. That is a little misleading to the general public, thinking they see a huge parking lot, they come in, they see 4 visitor slots, they assume it's for the park. Myself, if I didn't know any better, I would assume the same thing. But the idea of the visitors parking is for the facility itself and to go down to the wharf and visit and check it out. So I have spent a great deal of time trying to educate people and guiding them to what the town of Sydney offers for park parking, which is further down the road, and I believe there's about 12 spots, but it's not very well clear to the public. It's not very well posted for signage. And that's something that I have brought up to the attention of the town for many years, and then it falls into the back burner and I forget about it again until it becomes an issue. So that would be extremely helpful, is to get excuse me, better signage in place to steer people to the parking that is allotted for the actual park. The other thing, of course, is the misconception that the washrooms are public washrooms. So the federal government, well, we actually should back up a little bit. We run the facility for the federal government as a non-profit organization. So all the funding that comes into it to pay our bills comes from the users. So we have received a small grant on a yearly basis from the town of Sydney, which I stood before council years ago, got a $2,500 a year donation to help facilitate offset some of the costs for the use of the public, for the public to use the washrooms during office hours. So when I'm there, they're open and people are welcome to use them. Now, having said that, it's about a $10,000 a year bill for us to use it as it sits in the general public now, without introducing more people into the area bringing their dogs. So 2 concerns. One, of course, it's been closed for 2 years with COVID, and it's been great because it's very minimal cleaning required. And but I also have a lot of people ask me, why aren't they open? Aren't they public washrooms? Where are the public washrooms in this area? Who pays for them? On and on it goes. So once the federal government gives me the okay, I will be opening those washrooms again for public use, but it is at the discretion of my board of directors whether we do that or not. We're not forced to. It's just an act of kindness and goodwill on our behalf to have that open for the public. Now, my one concern now is that, yes, the public are going to use it, but they're also going to bring their dogs into the washrooms now too, because they're certainly not going to leave them outside. And in the rainy season, in their muddy feet, that's just going to add more wear and tear on our washrooms, our supplies, and on our cleaning costs. So those would probably be my 2 biggest concerns. Of course, I'm concerned about the bird sanctuary itself, but I know you've gone over that, and I'm not a bird expert. I just know what the birds like to do, and I think that's been solved by moving the fence line. I appreciate that. The birds, thank you. So my major concern would be, number 1, parking, and number 2, how to deal with the washroom issue. I am, open, and we as a board of directors are open to have any ideas brought forth and consider. I just will say, though, my time is important, and I spend a lot of time educating the public exactly what it is. And it's unfortunate that it kind of sits there and it appears to be. I would think the same thing. So if I could have help in signage and help in education, even maybe an article in the paper if this is passed and does become a free-run dog park, if we could have more education out there, that would really help me in my position. And I think I just wanted to add that if anybody has any questions or any concerns, I am here to answer them. I know it's item 13 on the agenda, so I'll try not to fall asleep or get too bored. Wait and get to that, unless if council agrees, if there's anything they'd like to just ask me now, I'm willing to help out in any way possible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Rook. We appreciate you taking the time to come and provide input tonight.
Thank you.
I'm putting that there because I do plan to duck out after this. But it's a great pleasure to be here. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jocelyn Gifford from 10448 Albay Road. I've written to you about 13A, the proposed Rest Haven off-leash dog park, and I wrote many paragraphs while completing the survey. But none of that is actually on the record, so I wanted to come and put my views on the record. After rereading the 34 letters in the agenda package, as I'm sure you have as well, many of my issues are covered well there, so I'll try to be as concise as possible. It's unfortunate that that level of qualitative public comment was not available the first time this came before you. I respect you and the dilemma you face. I must confess that also I feel a bit angry and embarrassed that Sydney as a community has accepted neighbors' objections to putting the dog park in Rathdown, Beaver, or Melville, which were the parks identified in the Parks Master Plan. But accepting those objections, we still think it's important enough that we're willing to consider this shoreline park and internationally recognized significant bird area abutting a migratory bird sanctuary, to say nothing of rejecting all previous plans for this neighborhood green space. I want to acknowledge that you're working hard and very hard and in good faith to meet valid but competing needs and interests here, and to do the right thing for residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and all councillors for all the time you've spent to meet with Friends of Shoal Harbour and to talk with residents. I recognize the competing needs are a safe, accessible, off-leash dog park in East Sydney, especially for seniors and people with mobility challenges. I understand that you feel this park was promised during the last election and is strongly desired by the community. I believe you value the need also to protect the wildlife in the migratory bird sanctuary, and you want to uphold all the statements in the current and new OCP, draft OCP, about biodiverse connected ecosystems informed by traditional, local, and scientific knowledge. I know you also value green spaces and neighborhood parks. So what to do? I urge you to choose to maintain a safe space for birds and nature, to honor the sanctuary that's been here since 1931, its shoreline, and the integrity of this neighborhood park. There have to be other places to put the dog park. The bird sanctuary cannot be moved somewhere else. Why do I think it's unsuitable? I live on Albay Road. I have had 2 dogs during all the 13 years I've lived in Sydney. I spend a lot of time in dog parks, both here and while away. I really enjoy watching dogs socialize and play. I do want everybody to be able to share the pleasure of watching groups of dogs socialize and play together. It puts a smile on my face every time. However, dogs running and playing together make noise and commotion. Many bark when they're having fun. This activity invariably causes birds nearby to stop feeding or resting and move away. The degree alarm to the birds depends on proximity and the dog's behavior. Bird sanctuaries are supposed to be places where birds can rest and feed undisturbed after migration, can bring chicks to rest on the grass as long as they survive before they can fly. Designated off-leash dog parks attract dogs, far more dogs than a neighborhood green space does. If it goes ahead, this will not only be the only off-leash dog park in East Sydney, it will also be the closest dog park to the Swartz Bay Ferry. Google off-leash dog parks near me, and you get today, and you get Cy Hampson and Elk Lake. Peter Grant may also be mentioned further down in the search results. I would frankly hate for people coming off the ferry and looking for a dog park to find Rest Haven Off-Leash Park the closest place to bring their dogs to relieve themselves after a ferry ride. Will a fence set back as in the new design protect the birds in the sanctuary? To some extent it will, but the fence isn't set back as far as I had hoped and does not buffer the noise and commotion. There's also no guarantee that owners will confine off-leash parks to the fenced area. The bird sanctuary is currently very poorly signed, so many park users will not even know that the shoreline is a bird sanctuary. I don't think Sydney has the resources to patrol and enforce the necessary bylaws. Also, dog parks pollute. Not all waste is promptly picked up. Urine simply soaks into the soil. I think we would end up with a contaminated site in need of remediation. If you agree with me and the many neighbors and letter writers that this is not an appropriate location for this facility, what can you do? Some suggestions that came to me are to strike an advisory committee of dog owners and perhaps environmentally minded residents to meet together and try to identify an alternate location. Two, revisit Rathdown, Melville, and Beaver Park with a fenced off-leash dog park option. I don't know that a fenced one was ever considered in those other places. If the demographic is primarily seniors and people with mobility challenges, find out more about what they actually want and where. Do we know where they live in Sydney? Would they like this park to be close to their homes? How big are their dogs? Are they looking for exercise, throwing a ball, or a pleasant place to sit and socialize with friends while dogs play? It would be easy to survey dog owners in Sydney. You have the addresses of everyone with a dog license. Where do they take their dogs now? What challenges are they facing? How often would they use an off-leash park? A small downtown green space might actually meet some of these needs much better. The other possibility is to conclude that while an off-leash park would be nice to have, the current effective control areas in Sydney and very close by, such as Rathdown, Melville, Peter Grant, Blue Heron, Parkland, Horth Hill, and Cy Hampson, really meet the need. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and I wish you well in your deliberations on this. I assume another not easy decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gifford, for coming to council this evening. We appreciate it. Seeing no further speakers, I'll bring public participation to a close, and we'll move on to section 5 on our agenda, which is bylaws. We have two bylaws to consider moving forward this evening. Bylaw number 2224, which is the water utility rates and charges, a bylaw amendment number 1, and bylaw number 2225, which is our sewer service charges bylaw amendment number 20. And I will turn to Mr. Hissick for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pretty straightforward. Based on the recently approved budget, there are increases required for both water and sewer utility fees. Pursuant to our new rate structure, which after 1 year of operation is working exactly as expected and intended, we are simply passing on the bulk water rate increase from the Saanich Peninsula Water Commission, which was 3.3%. So that same 3.3% is being applied to our variable water rate. On the sewer side, our review is still deferred, probably until next year, but we continue to experience deficits, and we think a small increase at this time will make it easier once the review is completed to get to where we need to be. So in total, the combined increase is 37 cents per 1,000 gallons, and I provided examples in the report as to what the impact might be on the average utility user. So for someone using 8,000 gallons a quarter, this overall increase would be less than $3 a quarter.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I'll turn if there are any questions from colleagues. If not, if we could go to the first bylaw under 5A, and we can proceed with 3 separate motions on readings.
I'll move that bylaw number 2224, amendment number 1 to water utility rates and charges bylaw number 2210 be given first reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Motion carries.
Move second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
And I'll move third reading.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed, the motion carries. Thank you, Councillor Garnett. And we have bylaw number 2225 under 5B.
And I'll move that bylaw number 2225, amendment number 20 to sewer service charges bylaw 1269 and 1995 be given first reading.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
Move second reading.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
And I'll move third reading.
Second.
All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Councillor. We'll next turn to Section 7, adoption of minutes from our regular council meeting of February 28th.
I'll move adoption. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any errors, omissions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. And we do turn to, under item 8, is business not completed at a previous meeting. And at our February 28th meeting, we did refer the COVID-19 Emergency Operations Center response after action report to this meeting because of the agenda we had that evening. And so in going to that item, I'll turn to staff for an introduction, please. Good evening, Chief Mickelson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Without question, the severity and duration of this COVID-19 pandemic necessitated the largest and most comprehensive response effort the town has ever had to undertake. Emergency management is built upon 4 pillars: mitigation, prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery. And each is subject to a continual review and an improvement process. This after action report is a comprehensive review of what we accomplished over the past 24 months and will be used to prioritize investments moving forward and how we can better our process if hopefully we never have to undertake a similar response procedure, but it'll inform how we can respond to future emergencies, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. I'll begin with Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief Mickelson. Yeah, very in-depth report. I was just curious, not getting actual specific details while all of this was going on. Did we actually ever have any outbreaks in any of our long-term care homes in Sydney?
So through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, during the time the EOC was stood up to a level 2, no. But recently, as a result of the Omicron variant, there has been a number of outbreaks throughout the Saanich Peninsula. So, but fortunately, we managed to, stave off that with the more dangerous variant when we had things stood up over the 4 or 5 months. We had a level 2 EOC stood up. So the answer is yes, we have had outbreaks in our facilities, but it's been related to the Omicron variant and not the much more deadly first variant that we dealt with.
I just want to thank everybody involved. I think it's one of the things we did really well compared to the rest of the country through Dr. Bonnie Henry and the way they handled staffing and the way the staff in the facilities handled themselves. It's a real credit to our community. And I mean, given Omicron and the way it was going to eventually happen, but the serious nature of what happened in other provinces and what they're dealing with, I was really happy to see that Sydney did such a great job. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to any other questions. Seeing none, thank you again, Chief, for the presentation, and we now have a recommendation, and I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. So it's a little bit different than what's in the report. So my motion is to refer to the Emergency Planning Committee, the report, to review and report back to Council by October 2022 on A, actions that town staff are or will be incorporating into operations, and B, recommendations for Council's consideration for additional actions, initiatives, or projects arising from the report.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, so I thought the report was an excellent report. There's a lot of ideas in there. I think there's probably things in there that maybe staff will adopt anyway, so it would be informative, I think, for council to hear those sorts of things, how we might be doing business different in the future. And also, there's some really good ideas in there for maybe future initiatives or projects that we might want to undertake, and that there might be budget implications for that. So what I was hoping is that the committee itself, rather than council wading through the whole report, could go through the report on our behalf and then come back with what they thought would be areas of focus for us, and perhaps some budget items, and targeting October in consultation with staff, maybe check with them, that would give them enough time to respond, and that would come back to us perhaps by next strategic planning session and budget time. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Mr. Humble if you wish to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Certainly the motion that Councillor O'Keefe is making seems reasonable. Reporting back to council in the fall of 2022, prior to getting into the budget, I think is appropriate, and I think there will be budget implications for some of these things. So, as I said, that's a reasonable time frame.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I just want to make a couple of comments. The first, I want to thank Chief Mickelson and Mr. Humble and other senior staff for initiating this third-party independent audit of these operations. As colleagues have commented, it's a very full report with recommendations, and we appreciate staff doing that. And I just want to highlight one aspect of the report. And acknowledge Mr. Jim Lamort, who is the principal of Smart Risk Control that did this independent audit. And Mr. Lamort is, the town has been fortunate to have Mr. Lamourt's services over a number of years. And the one comment I wish to highlight, or part I wish to highlight from the report, is the comment that Sydney was well prepared based on its previous 10 years of emergency planning, its emergency planning committee, and the regular work that it has done, such that we were well prepared as we were going into this pandemic and having to respond to the very unique I'm avoiding the word unprecedented, very unique circumstances. So thank you to all involved, both at the time the EOC was on operation, but also for this report coming forward. Leaving my comments there, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. So I'll next turn to council reports, and I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, who is our liaison to the Sydney Business Improvement Area Society, with a verbal report. Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. So the last meeting of the SBA board was a lot of good news. It happened before we had the latest, removal of the mask mandates, but everyone was looking forward to reopenings. And so the business community was feeling quite hopeful for this summer. As we all know, Sydney's events will be going on, parades and things like that. So people were kind of planning for a year as usual. For example, August is going to be Pride Month, and a number of our businesses have taken on kind of doing a bigger promotions. Well, not really promotions around, but tying in kind of as a celebration for that. So that will be something new that they do this year. Travel bookings are up. So all of our hotels and our venues are saying they're getting travel bookings in for the first time, and weddings and things like that. So they're looking forward for the end of the construction so that as people start coming back to town and parking will be needed on the street again, that will be available. And they wanted to pass on that they've had really good experience with our town staff in the issues that have come up with parking. There were a lot of new businesses moving in, new coffee shops, and people looking for boutique-sized spaces as well. So there was some discussion, and I brought this up about kind of looking at the OCP and whether they wanted to give feedback towards the downtown. And there was a suggestion about branding for the kind of the Beacon West, as we've got that new kind of that new downtown block that was kind of called Beacon West, and calling that Upper Avenue, and kind of using flags on the standards or signs to kind of get people to go across 5th Street and up towards that area, so that where Mother Nature's is and the old Smitty's, was it Smitty's? People will actually know that they can walk up there, and it won't be such a gap between where we've got our current free parking at the Mary Winspear and where the town proper and the shops begin. And so I think our business community will have some good feedback for us on that and how that might work out. The COVID survey of the members is being crunched, and so they'll probably report to us about what the business feedback about how they fared through COVID will be coming out soon. And that's the good news report.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. We appreciate the update. Any comments or questions from colleagues? Seeing none, if we could have a motion to receive.
Move receipt for information.
All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. And I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, who has a written report on the South Island Prosperity Project. Our Councillor O'Keefe being our representative to the Municipal Committee, Partners
Sure.
Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you have the report before you. I'll highlight a couple things, and there's one or two things that weren't in the report. So one of the highlights was survey of businesses, another survey of businesses. Not a huge sampling, and they were mainly larger businesses, and I'm not sure how many Sydney businesses participated. I think there's a lot of survey fatigue out there for local businesses. However, having said that, I think that the points that they brought up that came out of that survey were generally consistent, what I think we've been hearing anecdotally from local businesses. So I think it's valid. And one of the things I'll just focus on, one of the biggest issues again is housing affordability. And we had quite a discussion about how that is impacting the economy. So impacting their ability to hire people, their ability to expand their businesses. A lot of businesses are actually looking to expand. They want to grow, but having access to employees means employees who can have housing is a big issue. So you'll see in the report that they were asked how much they were in favor of supporting additional density in order to get more housing. And you'll see from the survey that the average response for that was 71%. So most are urging us local governments to, as we're going through our OCP processes, to think about are we providing enough housing, smaller housing for younger families, townhouses, that sort of thing. And then just one other thing I'll touch on is, and it wasn't mentioned in the report, but I think it's a good event that council members or others might want to consider. It's a online event on March 22nd called Ideas and Impact, Priced Out of Our Cities. And it's, again, about affordable housing. And so what it is, they've got a couple experts that will talk about the causes and impacts of the housing crisis and some solutions on how we can deal with that. So that's, if you're interested in that, anybody, it's free for anyone, and you can register that on SIP's website. And yeah, I'll leave it at that unless there's questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. We appreciate the update. Any questions or comments from colleagues? Seeing none, if we could have a motion to receive.
So move.
Go ahead, take a seconder first.
Second?
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Councillor O'Keefe?
I was just going to say, receive for receipt and forward to EAC for information.
Okay, the mover and seconder are
Yep,
good
that
with that.
works.
Very good. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. So we'll now turn to committee reports, and I'll turn to Councillor Rintoul, our council liaison to the Advisory Planning Commission.
Thank you. I'll move the minutes be received.
Second.
Any discussion, Councillor Rintoul?
Yeah, I'll just identify this as having been very much an organizational meeting, establishing the committee structure, the commission structure for the year ahead. And I'll note that Chair Kelly Tomer was re-nominated and acclaimed as chair of the APC, and Clarence Bolt by acclamation as vice chair of the APC. And so, of course, our thanks to them and other members of the commission for their volunteerism and their help to the community. And as council's aware, the APC will be quite busy in the weeks and months ahead with a number of referrals from committee of the whole coming out this evening, and also with respect to reviewing the draft OCP in the week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, chair of our committee of the whole meeting last week. Please walk us through the minutes and several recommendations.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with, I'll move that the minutes be received.
Second.
Any errors or omissions? All in favor? None opposed, motion carries.
Okay, there are several recommendations. The first one is with respect to the OCP amendment application and zoning amendment application for 2180 Beacon Avenue West. And committee recommends, and I so move, that official community plan amendment application number OP 100036 and zoning amendment application number RZ 100104 for the property at 2180 Beacon Avenue West be tabled until the OCP review process is complete and a new official community plan bylaw has been adopted for the town, at which time these applications will be brought back from the table and considered by council.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Okay, we have the late item 12BR1, the correspondence from Mr. Moffat. I'll move receipt for information.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, second recommendation is with respect to development permit application number DP 100824 and development variance permit application number DV 100309, and this is 9617 7th Street to relax maximum height in order to develop 2 single-family small lot dwellings. Committee recommends, and I so move, that development permit application number DP 100824 to permit the construction of 2 small lot, single-family dwellings, and development variance permit application number DV 100309 to relax the requirements for maximum height for the property at 9617 7th Street be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, the third recommendation is with respect to 2770 Harbor Road. The committee recommends, and I so move, that development permit application number DP 100828 to permit the development of 4 3-story mixed-use buildings for the property at 2770 Harbor Road be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment, subject to the condition that prior to review by the APC, the applicant provides 1, a revised flood hazard assessment identifying proposed uses and confirming that all potential uses and proposed floor areas can be safely used for the uses intended, and 2, additional turning template information for the proposed upper parking area showing how vehicles larger than a compact passenger vehicle would maneuver in and out of the parking area.
Second.
Moved and seconded simultaneously. Discussion, Councillor Garnett.
Just an amendment, it should be 2270, not 2770.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Okay, the next recommendation is with respect to 9989 and 9991 5th Street. And the committee recommends, and I so move, that development permit application number DP 100829 to permit the development of a 4-story, 19-unit multifamily residential development at 9989 and 9991 5th Street be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for further review and comment.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
Okay, the next item is with respect to a liquor license amendment application for the Mary Winspear Center, and it was recommended by committee, and I so move, that 1, that staff be directed to gather the views of residents regarding the proposed changes to the liquor primary license for 2243 Beacon Avenue, Mary Winspear Center, and report back to council with the results. 2, that the methods used to gather residents' views include the following, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council for consideration. A, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 100 meters, 328 feet of 2243 Beacon Avenue be notified by mail. B, that advertisements be placed in 2 consecutive issues of the Peninsula News Review. And 3, that council provide a special public participation opportunity at the council meeting where the public may speak to the proposal.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. And the last one, Councillor Warner?
And the last one, and this is with another liquor license amendment application, this one for Beacon Brewing at 9829 3rd Street. Was recommended by committee, and I so move, that 1, that staff be directed to gather the views of residents regarding the proposed amendments to the applicant's manufacturer license and lounge area endorsement for 9829 3rd Street, Beacon Brewing, and report back to council with the results. 2, that the methods used to gather residents' views include the following, and that any written correspondence received be forwarded to council for consideration. A, that owners and tenants in occupation of property within 100 meters, 328 feet of 9829 3rd Street be notified by mail. B, that advertisements be placed in 2 consecutive issues of the Peninsula News Review. And 3, that council provide a special public participation opportunity at the council meeting where the public may speak to the proposal.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you, Councillor, for walking us through that. Now turn to section 13, which are staff reports, and the first is item 13A, The updated design for Rest Haven Park off-leash dog park. A report from staff, and I'll turn to staff for an introduction, please. Good evening, Ms. Clary.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So during the February 7th Council meeting, Council directed staff to redesign the Rest Haven Park. Staff have redesigned the off-leash dog fully fenced area based on the feedback from Council during that meeting and feedback from the public from the previous engagement period. Changes made included relocating the fence line to be a bit smaller than previously planned and to be fully contained within the existing trail network, adding a concrete sidewalk for accessibility, adding a couple benches. That was something that staff thought would be good to add, adding a cart path trail along the perimeter of the path. So cart path is just gravel mixed material that when compacted, it's more firm than traditional wood chips, and it'll stay in place a bit better. With these changes, we do recommend that the budget be increased to about $50,000, up from $40,000 that was previously recommended. This report also addresses some of the feedback received to date. However, based on the feedback tonight, there's been lots of additional feedback received. Overall, staff are still recommending this dog park because a fenced off-leash dog park was a key priority, was one of the 9 key priorities in the Parks Master Plan back in 2018. And there's really not any other options from that staff could recommend on the east side of Sydney. And the net benefit of a fenced dog area would be a positive compared to the status quo for the migratory bird sanctuary, which Rest Haven Park is outside of. However, it is neighboring it. So all that being said, if this isn't meant to be, it's not meant to be. At this point, staff wouldn't really recommend revisiting some of the other parks that were identified in the Parks Master Plan, just because they all have their issues. But yeah, that's a summary of the report.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. I'll turn to Council. If there are any questions regarding the report, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Ms. Clary. And I know we've had some additional information come from staff, and just wanted to kind of bring that into the conversation, because I think it's important for the public to know that staff did do a fair amount of research, and in regards to best practices for other dog parks. And so you've commented on things like having the park double gated, that there's appropriate drainage there for the park. And I'm also wondering about, there's some comments, quite a few comments about large and small dogs, and whether staff would like to comment in terms of their plans or recommendations on that.
Ms. Clary?
Sure. So I should preface this by saying I'm not a dog park expert. However, what I have heard from other members of staff is that this would be more suitable. The size of dog park is more suitable for smaller sized dogs. Really, for larger dogs, you need a much bigger area, which, based on public feedback, just really there's not really anywhere in Sydney where a larger dog park for those really large dogs. There's not a suitable location. So.
Okay.
Thank you. Please continue, Councillor.
Okay, thanks. So if the other question through you to staff was, aside from the dog park, were we planning any other enhancements to the park? I know there was mention of benches and things, and I guess where I'm going with this is, if the dog park were not to be approved, would we be in a position to use that money, say perhaps for covered picnic areas, which was something that was identified in the Parks Master Plan for Rest Haven Park?
Through to Councillor O'Keefe. That's something that could be considered as a 2023 project. As you can see, there's already been a lot of work going into this dog park. It takes quite a bit of time and effort to plan these things, so that's not something we'd be able to do in 2022. However, it could be something that could be brought forward for the 2023 budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Fallon.
Thank you. If I may, through you to staff, Ms. Clary, we heard earlier in regards to the bird sanctuary, so I'm wondering if we're looking at putting a dog park in here, and as there seems to be little signage as far as it being a bird sanctuary, if there are plans to do anything to improve that situation regardless of the dog park, but certainly in particular, if we are going to encourage more dog usage, then we have to look at ensuring the public understands that this is a shared environment and that a migratory bird sanctuary does have priority.
Thank you. Through to Councillor Fallett. Yes, absolutely. Staff did have a conversation with Environment Canada about this, and we understand that City of Victoria and I think the District of Saanich, or maybe it was Esquimalt, recently developed dogs, a signage for the risks of having dogs off leash in bird sanctuaries. So staff in Sydney would look to do the same, and we've already started that initial conversation with Environment Canada to develop similar signage.
Okay, so to that point is one that just to make sure that I understand your response and you understand mine, is that we identified clearly that it is a bird sanctuary and also behavior etiquette from dogs and their owners.
Yes, through to Councillor Fallett. Sorry, I think maybe you're referring to like a dog etiquette sign for the dog park and then also bird sanctuary signage, or are you thinking of combining the two?
I'm thinking,
Yes.
Regardless of the dog park, I think there should be some sort of etiquette and behavior expectation if you are walking your dog in this park. This is a bird migratory sanctuary, and these are the recommendations of behavior.
Thank you. Yeah, we can do that regardless of if this is moves forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. Seeing no further questions, we have two recommendations, and I will separate them. The one is to proceed, whether or not to proceed, and then the second is a budget item, which is contingent on the first. So if a councillor would like to consider the first recommendation. Councillor O'Keefe.
I'm going to make a recommendation that staff cease plans for a dog park at Rest Haven Park.
Seconded.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Keefe, seconded by Councillor Fallett. I'll turn to the mover first.
Thank you. Oops. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was initially very excited about this dog park. I'm have been a dog owner. I love dogs. Been to dog parks. The benefits of dog parks are well documented in terms of building community resiliency, getting people together and forming connections, and that sort of thing. So I was initially very excited about it. However, after doing a bit more research and listening to the feedback from residents, I'm now more inclined to think that although it would be great to have a dog park, I don't think that this is the place to do it. While I recognize that we have redesigned the park somewhat to pull the border back away from the waterfront, I think that's a good thing. But my understanding, what limited understanding I have about bird and wildlife behavior is it's not just the physical aspect of dogs running around the shoreline and barking at birds and being physically in their space, but the noise that they make and migratory birds flying over a dog park, they're going to perceive that as a threat. One might argue that, I think part of the rationale, and I subscribed to this originally as well, is it would be good to have those dogs penned in at that park because at least they won't be running around all over the place. But what my concern now is, and I hear that echoed from the feedback we're receiving, is that might be true. But we're going to be attracting a lot more dogs to that park. More people are gonna be coming down there, more dogs, more barking, more noise. So that's a concern for me. The other thing is in terms of preserving that space, that open space. And so over the last couple of weeks, I've been down to the park a few times, talked to people there, talked to Ms. Rook, and went and talked to the neighbors across the street to hear firsthand from them. And the thing that I took away most from that feedback was that they all commented about how well used that park had been during COVID. So they saw people there out there with their kids, you know, with their friends, having a safe, open environment where they could play and run around, toss a ball, play frisbee. There was seniors that went down there in lawn chairs and sat in big circles just so they could have some sort of connection with each other. So I was really, you know, that really impacted me. Also, as I think about in our OCP, one of our goals is to attract more families to Sydney. And to do that, as we've said, we're likely going to have smaller lots or townhouses with little yards or 3-bedroom condos that accommodate them. And so they're not going to have a lot of space in their own yard to run around. And so I think it's important that if we're looking to maybe start densifying our community a bit more, and if we want to attract families, I think it's important to maintain those green open spaces so those kids and families have places to get around and play. Couple other things, the parking and traffic, that's been well documented, won't go into that. One other thing though, in terms of the small dogs only, my concern about that is the big dogs will continue to come to that park. So if we're still gonna have a park, maybe it's gonna be filled with small dogs. The big dogs are still gonna go there. And when I've been down to the park, it's not the cute little white fluffy dogs that are, you know, making big barking noises and running around on the shoreline. It's the big ones. And so that whole initial positive aspect for me about containing dogs so they're not going to disturb the birds is sort of, that positive aspect is taken away if it's only going to be for small dogs. I think that's sort of the main points, the traffic we've covered, and I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to Councillor Follett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I went back and forth on this, and having been a dog owner myself, I know the value of enabling a dog the opportunity to walk free and unencumbered and off leash. And one of the main things is behavior and training, and that you've got good control of your animal. Whether it's leashed or not leashed, you need to have control of your animal. And having made use of dog parks myself in the past for my dogs, I see the value both for the canines and for the humans in this whole element. So I did a little bit of research. One of the letter writers, Ms. Jennings, is a dog trainer, and I took the opportunity and had a very good phone conversation with her about her recommendations. I had also looked online. And one of the things that she said, you know, it was very important to separate the large and the small dogs. She said she sees it from her own clients. They're looking for safe places for their small dogs, and if they're overwhelmed by the big dogs, it's not going to be effective. The other thing that came out of the conversation, both with Ms. Jennings and my online research, is the size of the dog park. And I did ask staff earlier today, and the size of the area that we're looking at is just under half an acre. The minimum size recommended from humane societies and dog trainers in general is a half acre to an acre. So we're already on the small side of that whole thing. There's also strong recommendations that there is separation of large animals and small animals. And one of the things that also came out in my conversation with Ms. Jennings is to make sure that there are barriers, visual barriers from dogs entering the play, so that the ones who are in the midst of play and frolic and rough and tumble aren't sort of sidetracked into looking at who's coming into the park. We're not going to have that ability. One of the other things is to have play areas and shapes and implements and you know, tree stumps to tunnels and everything like that, which de-escalates the energy of the animals. So I'm thinking we've got animals that have been frolicking around and having a great time in the park. It's time to put them on the leash and take them out, and we're taking them out in a bird sanctuary, and they're still hyper and they're gung-ho. And I don't think it's a good mix. I think our intent is good, and I think it's in the right place. I just think that this is not the place and the park to do it. An earlier speaker today, Ms. Gifford, had some really important comments, in my opinion, is to create a committee, yet another committee, but it doesn't have to come from the town. I think if dog owners get together with Humane Society and dog trainers and environmentalists and take a look, what are the needs? Where do we need it? And she also addressed it, and that's one of the things that I thought about as well. Who needs an off-leash dog park perhaps the most are the ones who are the dogs that are living in condos in the core of Sydney. Their dogs also need to be able to get out. And so maybe the town can't do everything for everybody, and maybe a dog park is not something, an off-leash dog park is not something we can provide for our community. But I think I would pass this recommendation on very strongly to staff, is as we were thinking about our signage for our parks, it's not something that has to happen bingo, but think about etiquette in general for dog behavior. What do we want from our community? And be a good neighbor. And if people are going to have, we've got several areas that, Peter Grant, that you can have your dogs off leash, you still have to have control of your animals. So I'm not going to vote, or sorry, I will vote in favor of this motion. I'm not going to vote in favor of creating a dog park at Rest Haven. I think it's not the best idea that we can come up with, and this is not the best location. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. Next on the speaking list, I have Councillor Garnett, Councillor Duncan, and Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. As the speakers were speaking earlier, you hit the nail on the head. It's been very difficult. It's an issue that I've promoted because I've heard time and again that people are really in need of an off-leash dog park. It came up at the pop-up engagements for when they were doing the park master plan, and it was something that was stickered to the notepad a lot. And I was in favor of this, and I really would like to thank staff for the changes they made in this particular design, that changes that both reflect what myself and the mayor had hoped to see happen. I have, and most of the comments that have come in, and I just want to thank the public for their input, all their emails, letters, people that spoke to me on the street, taking the time to do that. It's really important that the public has a say, and it's great that so many people were willing to do it, and the people that spoke tonight as well. It's an important part of our public engagement, and I'm impressed by how many people continue to do that. A lot of the concerns people expressed, I think, could be mitigated with this park. However, the parking issue that was brought up tonight, and I saw it firsthand yesterday, and it's interesting that the speaker brought it up. I went to the park, and every single place you could park along Rest Haven was gone. There was nowhere to park, and then I knowing where the public parking lot is, I pulled in, and none of those spots were taken. They was all open, and I thought, this is just weird. This park lot is like, so that people must not know what's there. And of course, I took a walk back the sidewalk, and you look, and the sign actually is kind of inhibited by the utility pole there. So I can see why people may not see it if they don't know. And plus, you're on a corner turning with cars parked, so you don't want to really take your eyes off the road. So it is kind of positioned in a place that's not beneficial to the eye for somebody to know if they don't know what's there to find it. So that I can see how people could say that parking is an issue, and it has been for a while on both sides of the street. So that is a concern for sure. And I know staff's looking into implementing a 2 to 3 hour time limit possibly in the future. But my concern around that is enforcement, and and if it is enforced, and if it gets to know that it's not enforced, will people just ignore it, and it creates a whole other kettle of fish that's a bit confusing for people. But for me, the biggest thing is I've gone back and did a real long walk up to the edge of the water, and it's the migratory bird sanctuary. It for me is the biggest concern, and having done some research and noting that people don't seem to impact the shoreline birds as much when they're walking by, but if they even have a dog on a leash, it actually stresses the birds out. And then, of course, off-leash dogs that aren't in a park can chase them and cause even greater damage and stress. But the fact is, I did a slow walk up the bank to where the proposed fence line would be, and if you look hard enough, you can see evidence of there's been birds eating food there. So they'll go right up to that space. So, and I imagine in the early hours of the morning, there's birds probably actually going to be in that space foraging for food. And if somebody brings their dog in there in the morning and it's early, the dog is going to chase the birds out of there. So that's a stressor right there. And the excited nature of play, which I love because I'm a big, large dog owner and it's fantastic to watch. They do bark, they get excited, they romp. And even the sounds alone will stress these birds out. So as much as I think this is such an important amenity to add to the community, that bird sanctuary is so critically important. I just have real concerns around the negative impacts it's going to have on the birds in the shoreline. And speaking of the parks you said before, Peter Grant is an off-leash dog park, but it's not necessarily a safe one because it's not enclosed, and there's openings right to the Pat Bay Highway just feet away. I would never I've walked my dogs through there for years, and I would never let them off the leash there just because anything can happen, can be spooked, and run right onto the highway and be hit. I think it's a possible potential location, not to bring up new ones, but it's big. If it's fenced, if it's leveled, if it's grassed, you could split it in two for large and small. It's not near a bird sanctuary. It's far enough away from Ray Creek and the riparian area. There is a reasonable amount of parking in the area. It's just a possible thing. It might cost a bit more money, but I think it is a possibility that we could work towards doing it. But as far as this particular Rest Haven Park dog park goes, as much as I really wanted this to work, I just having done research, having been down there, I'm really concerned about the impacts this will have on the birds, shoreline birds, and so I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be supporting the motion as well. I was torn on this, and I had originally written up, gone through step by step to say why I was going to support it. But Ms. Gifford's argument that I found most compelling against it, because that's the one I can't see being mitigated by the current staff plan, was the ferry traffic and having people from outside of town attracted to that area. I was torn on some of the arguments about people being attracted from outside the area to this park simply because it had become a dedicated off-leash dog park, given the size, as Councillor Fallett mentioned. It didn't seem like it would be a big draw, and it would continue to be a neighborhood park as it is. Though I have to admit, if people began searching and were looking from the ferry, that would definitely do it. The town has already built one more in the past couple of years, kind of a catchment park. So the Rathdown Park for children, the playground there, I know does attract people from outside the neighborhood, just like Talista Park does. And parking has not been a problem in that neighborhood as a result of attracting people to that park from outside, and dogs as well. Now that, more people bring their children, they bring their dog, and they hack a ball for the dog while the kids play in the park. So I could see that as maybe not being as big an issue as the neighborhood was concerned about, over top of the concern they already have from parking in that neighborhood generated from the liveaboards that are already in Seaham Harbor. Like, that's where those cars are from. That's why they don't move. They belong to the people who live on the boats. But there were some issues that have been brought up that I think relate to the overall bird sanctuary as a whole. and clearly to the Safe Harbor and just parking management in that area. So I'm glad that we've had this discussion. I can see that there are no other parks in this side of Sydney that would be suitable. Many people kept pointing back to the parks that staff had already ruled out without apparently reading the staff report about why they were ruled out. This just means we don't have a suitable area there. There won't be an off-leash dog park. It seems that in order to accommodate the number of dogs we have in Sydney, looking at more controlled, off-leash control areas, which is unofficially what most of these parks already are, is kind of what we have to do to spread out the impact, I think. Because we have a lot of dogs here, and it sounds like what we've just basically come up against is we have too many people living in very small houses who still bought a dog. And there's really no way that a government can control the fact that people aren't necessarily making suitable choices. And it's difficult to tell people, especially, a dog as a companion and its company, and it's important for some people to really have that companion, that might not be suitable anymore. So we're just kind of stuck here with no good options. It is regrettable because one of our, as staff has pointed out, our goals from the Parks Master Plan was to identify a dog park. So in order to say we're not going to do any dog park on this side, we are dropping a goal. And this was a conflict that some letter writers identified, that was either we put one in a park where it was not previously identified, thus going against the master plan and the specific plan for that park, or we're in the situation where we actually drop an entire goal. Either way we look at this, we've deviated from our Parks Master Plan. And I don't actually think, as the letter writer initially suggested, that if we deviated from the plan for this specific park and did build the dog park, that would be an example of bad governance. I think it's a very good example of governance that a government can look at a plan that it had on paper, examine it thoroughly, go out to public comment, have the staff review the data, and say, it turns out that the plan we had on paper was just a paper plan, and it didn't accurately reflect reality upon closer examination, and so we've deviated from that plan. And so I hope that this will be a demonstration of good governance, and that deviating from a written plan can be that in some cases. We've identified that the bird sanctuary is a major issue for people. People care about that bird sanctuary. A number of the issues that were raised regarding the birds, Councillor Keefe brought up that having the dogs contained would be better. I agree. But of course, the fact that, it is the larger dogs that go down and harass them, and if this is a small dog park, that doesn't help. I'm not concerned about, I would not have been concerned about mallards and Canada geese not being able to forage there anymore, especially considering people identified it as a picnic area. If you've been on a lawn with Canada geese, you know those are not actually compatible uses. And Canada geese, we find, are actually pest birds in this area. We addle their eggs when they are in our water reservoir because there's too many of them. They contaminate it with E. coli. A lot of the E. coli contamination along our beaches are due to the fact we have too many Canada geese, and we're able to hunt them actually in the farms around Central Saanich and Saanich because they destroy crops. So we don't actually want to encourage more Canada geese in this area. And mallards don't seem to have a problem doing for themselves. What we're worried about is the migratory birds, the dabbler, and the diving ducks that are out there in the water. And to that end, the biggest problem we have with dogs, in addition to the people going down to the mudflats in this park, is that people are taking them off leash actually on the beaches where these birds are actually frequented. And so it's the concern that we saw from people about this being in the bird sanctuary, I found a little spurious and was simply looked a little bit like an argument being marshaled against something they just didn't want, because where these dogs actually go is down around Roberts Bay, and they're right there being thrown sticks into the water and running along the beach, being able to get actually at the birds where they are feeding and near where the blue herons are nesting. And so if we're really concerned about dogs threatening our migratory birds, what we need to be focusing on is education and control of birds, of dogs actually on that beach right now. I had hoped that if we had a dog park, an off-leash dog park closer in this area, people would go there instead, but I don't think that would divert people. People want to take their dogs for a walk on the beach. And so this is just a problem that continues. I hope that we can look at Councillor Fallett's suggestion about putting in signage about behavior that we're looking for dogs and dog owners along this beach, or along the Rest Haven beach as well, and perhaps that sign could be replicated at their other beach accesses, and that would solve that problem.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, then Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. So it's been quite an interesting discussion. I was going to make some comments about the bird sanctuary part, and I confess I am not sold on that the off-leash dog park is going to have a significant impact on the IBA, the bird sanctuary. But one of the things I did want to pick up on in the conversation that's been going on is this focus on the value of the migratory bird sanctuary at Rest Haven Park. And I look in the OCP at the Harbor Road Marine Industrial Area and the boundary of that, which is right off Rest Haven Park. And I think about all the things going on in our Harbor Road Marine Industrial Area and how compatible those are with that migratory bird sanctuary. And I don't think I really want to encourage the community to be setting up this adversarial between we want to protect the migratory bird sanctuary there and the Harbor Road Marine Industrial Area that we really value. And it's identified in the OCP as something we want to protect. And I don't want to see signage that says the industrial area isn't compatible with this bird sanctuary. It's one of these balancing act things. It's a challenge because, yeah, the migratory bird sanctuary was there first, but all this industrial activity is there now, and it's considered quite important. And that's something that we are, in fact, reviewing in the current OCP, right? So I just would not want us to lose sight of that, you know, these are related. Typically, a federal government dock is not compatible with a migratory bird sanctuary either. So, you know, it's even the federal government's got some issues with how they're managing that area. But I think bottom line is that we've got a lot of feedback from the immediate neighborhood saying they don't want it. And I think there's been a shotgun of all possible reasons that I might raise to object to the thing. And some of them may stick and some of them don't really seem all that reasonable. But bottom line is we're getting a significant amount of resistance from the neighborhood. And it's not a perfect location. And I have always given more weight to the views of the immediate neighborhood that's going to be affected than, you know, than I guess residents living significantly away from it. End of the day, I'm going to vote in favor of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. I'll turn to Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm very much inclined to support the motion that's before us as well. And in the same breath, I'm very appreciative of staff bringing back a proposal that is very much a hybrid. And I think staff put a lot of effort and a very detailed report together that's been very helpful in this discussion. And I think with residents and with members of the community providing feedback this evening, it's been a very respectful dialogue, and I concur with Councillor Duncan that this is what good governance is about. It's about putting out an idea and a concept and vetting it with the community and acting on that feedback. Ultimately, I think there's probably you know, some unintended consequences that would come with with a hybrid park of this nature that we see before us, and we've heard a lot about that in the discussion this evening, so I won't review all of those concerns. It just feels like we can't make this park all things for all users, and that's what we're trying to do in what is a relatively small piece of land. And to me, to Councillor Fallott's point earlier, at under half an acre, this is starting to feel like it's perhaps too confined a space for the intended use. And so, again, I appreciate the efforts of staff to bring this forward. Our job here is to listen, and like Councillor Wainwright, I'm sympathetic to the immediate residents, to some of the challenges they see currently, particularly with parking in a very congested area. And I have concerns for trying to make this park all things for all people, and just not being successful in doing so. So again, I'm very inclined to support the motion that's before us. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole, and I'll speak briefly. I appreciate the full discussion and all councillors speaking to this important item that's come forward. I first want to thank staff for bringing this forward. I won't repeat the good governance aspects that a couple of colleagues have made reference to, but this was the desire and the perceived need for a dog park in the east side of Sydney has been recognized for quite some time, and I think it was important to bring this forward to council and to the community. I want to, there's been a lot of discussion about what's the best dog park, the best design elements and that sort of thing. I think staff did an excellent job of proposing a dog park, for this particular location. And as is indicated in the report, and Ms. Clary spoke to this evening, the intention from staff in designing this park was a recognition and an acknowledgement that there are already impacts on the wildlife within the park. We've had descriptions, from councillors about particular behaviors, and what we were looking for is to try to actually mitigate, those unfavorable, undesirable behaviors. And staff believe that there is the opportunity with the design of this park to actually reduce the current impacts from the current dog behavior in the park. The challenge, as we've heard from local residents, organizations like Friends of Shoal Harbour, Ms. Gifford and others, is that there is a fair degree of uncertainty as to whether or not this particular off-leash dog park will in fact mitigate or reduce the impacts on the wildlife. And for me, going back to our OCP, or going back to discussions we've had earlier, going back to the territorial acknowledgement that I give before each meeting, when we acknowledge the stewardship of by the Wasanich people of these lands for millennia, and that we are looking to also to continue to be good stewards of these lands, is that while it would be an appreciated the dog park would be an amenity appreciated by the community, I think applying the lens and looking at our roles as stewards of the environment is that we can have a positive impact through some of the suggestions and comments from staff in terms of improved signage and that sort of thing. So I would prefer to go with let's prioritize being environmental stewards. Let's not go with the possible uncertainty that this dog park may introduce in terms of the possibility of unintended dramatic increase in users and impacts, and implement some of the, whether it's shoreline improvements, additional signage for behaviors, some of the other impacts or some of the other suggestions that came from the community during the park's master plan for picnic shelters or other amenities. And I think that is the best way for council and for the town to go with respect to this amenity. I think the public should appreciate that staff has done their work through the park's master plan process, and today there is not an alternate location, that staff would recommend or that we should reasonably ask staff to pursue in terms of an off-leash dog park area. We are a small, compact community. We continue to densify, gradually in this neighborhood, but throughout our community. And we are fortunate to have in our broader community. I know, we do have the Sydney North Saanich boundary down the middle of McDonald Park Road and elsewhere, but our students go to school at Parkland School and North Saanich School, Middle School in North Saanich, and residents regularly go to Southampton Park as well. So there are facilities for dog walkers. Are they the ideal parks for dogs socializing and that sort of thing? And I've certainly seen the benefits of that as well. Perhaps not, but I think on balance, we are taking the right decision this evening for our community. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And again, thank you to staff. I will next turn to item 13B, which is the Active Transportation Plan Award. That is a request for proposal 2022-001. And I will turn again to Ms. Clary for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the town received 5 strong proposals in response to our RFP for the Active Transportation Plan. A small team of engineering staff independently reviewed them and then met and discussed our results. Overall, urban systems was ranked the highest based on our ranking scheme, which is identified in the report. Urban Systems also recently completed Central Saanich's Active Transportation Plan. If you're interested in the work they do, you can go check that out. But their proposal was within budget, and they also had a very strong engagement side of their proposal. So staff are comfortable moving forward, awarding to them.
Thank you, Ms. Clary. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions. Seeing none, we do have a recommendation.
I'll move the recommendation that the consulting contract for the Active Transportation Plan be awarded to Urban Systems.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll turn to item 13C, and that's the Saanich Peninsula Accessible Advisory Committee. And I'll turn to Mr. Humble for an introduction, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a follow-up report to the notice of motion from Councillor O'Keefe that was made back in October of 2021 regarding the request for consideration of establishing a tri-municipal joint advisory committee on accessibility. Staff were instructed to work with the staff of North Saanich and Central Saanich regarding the feasibility, governance aspects, and potential impacts on town staff and town resources regarding the establishment of such a committee. So the report before council addresses these matters along with proposed terms of reference that the corporate officers worked on, collaborated on, and agreed on that they felt was appropriate to move forward in terms of consideration. It was very much based on I think the original draft terms of reference that were put together by the council proponents from the various municipalities. It's my understanding that the same report was before North Saanich Council, I believe last Monday, and that the recommendations from that staff report were approved, with the only change being the addition of a council member alternate that council may want to consider, and it's not embedded in the staff recommendation. But further, staff were also advised by North Saanich staff that North Saanich Council made some additional suggestions regarding the terms of reference, and I'll just point those out. One, that the potential member from the Panorama Recreation Commission, that consideration be given to that being a staff person from Panorama rather than a commission member. And the second suggestion was that consideration be given to increasing the number of citizen appointees, i.e. a person who is either living with a disability or is assisting someone with a disability, that be increased from 3 in the terms of reference to 5, and this would then subsequently increase the voting members from 9 to 11 in the overall terms of reference. It is the view of staff that these potential suggestions, while council may want to consider them, I should note that it's still before Central Saanich Council, and so it might be prudent for council just to consider those, let the terms of reference stand as proposed, and that the committee, once they've had an opportunity to meet and get to know the terms of reference, etc., that they could then bring those changes forward for to the respective councils for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Humble. We appreciate those comments. So we do have 3 recommendations. I'm going to separate them, and if I could look for a colleague to consider moving the first recommendation. Councillor Garnett?
Do you have a question? You were okay with me moving it?
Oh, no, I was gonna move the recommendation.
I can do it. I'll move recommendation 1 that staff liaise with District of North Saanich and District of Central Saanich staff to establish the Saanich Peninsula Accessibility Advisory Committee.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Councillor Garnett? Councillor O'Keefe?
No, that's fine.
Call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous.
I'll move number 2 that council support in principle the terms of reference to establish the Saanich Peninsula Accessibility Committee.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor Fallon.
Thank you. Yes, I'm glad that Mr. Humble brought that up regarding the voting members to increase the voting members with disabilities. When I looked under the Accessible BC Act, it states that half the members, what I write, are persons with disabilities or individuals who support persons with disabilities. So I don't know if it's something that we necessarily have to do this evening, or if that's something that can be left for when the committee is formed and meets to go through. But I think that's an important thing, to respect that there is adequate participation of people who walk the walk, and I don't mean that disrespectfully, but who are in the know of what they need. And I think back to Jeanette Hughes and the fight that she took on in the town years ago, looking at increasing awareness for disabilities. And during the past summer, when I participated along with Councillor O'Keefe in the formation of this, to get this to where it is now, with representatives from North Saanich and Central Saanich, and we had 2 members of the community who either have disabilities themselves or live with individuals with disability. The value of their input is not to be undermined. So I just want to make sure that we don't miss out on that opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Fallon, for those comments. If I could suggest it, it's not uncommon when new committees are established for the terms of reference to be proposed, such as we have before us tonight. And then when they go to the first committee meeting, they will approve those terms of reference. And if they have suggestions as that body, they can make those. They can make motions back to the respective councils for any changes. So I think it's worthwhile, as Mr. Humble did, to raise some of the points, and feel free to raise points. But I wouldn't suggest we make amendments this evening. But our council liaisons to that committee can certainly raise those comments that we hear through our discussion tonight. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? And the motion carries. And so the third recommendation is that we move forward by appointing a member of council to serve as our liaison, a voting member liaison to that committee, and then I'll look for a motion to recommend an alternate. So, Councillor Garnett?
Is it okay if I do it in 2, or do you want it done, or 1, or do you want it done in 2?
One at a time, yeah.
Okay.
If we can move our...
I'll move that Councillor O'Keefe be appointed as a voting member to represent the town.
Second.
Moved in second. Councillor O'Keefe, are you willing to serve in that role? Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
And I'll move that Councillor Fallon be appointed as the alternate.
Second.
Second, Councillor Fallon, would you serve
Yes,
in that
thank
appointment? Thank you. All in favor? And the motion carries. Thank you. I'll just finish by thanking both Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Fallett for meeting with their colleagues and the two other municipalities to bring this forward. I think this is a great step forward for our community here on the peninsula, broader community here on the peninsula. We'll turn to item 13D, which is a report on the group purchasing plan and purchasing policy exemption. And I'll turn to Mr. Hissick for an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is indeed information for council on the town joining a new group purchasing plan and seeking permission to purchase our replacement computers under that plan. There is an amount of information in there about the canoe group purchasing plan, which is essentially a local government plan that started in Alberta and has spread throughout the country. And there's great benefit for smaller local governments that don't have specialized purchasing personnel, such as the town, to take advantage of these services that are available. We are looking to replace our desktop computers this year. They're in their 5th year of use, and we believe there's value to be gained by doing it through this new group purchasing plan and using an existing supplier that we're very comfortable with.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I have two questions that I might begin with and then turn to colleagues. Mr. Hissick, the recommendation makes reference, as you just have, to the computer replacement plan. Would this recommendation just serve to this particular replacement, and that if there is another replacement 4 or 5 years from now, this would come back to the council of the day?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Every exemption from the policy has to come to council. So unless we brought forward a policy that delegated that authority to staff, then we'd have to keep coming back to you.
Thank you, and I think you've partially answered the second question, and that is in the first paragraph of your report. It says, this opportunity with Canoe is expected to be used more consistently to gain access to reduced prices for many goods and services regularly purchased by the town. So the town may in the future be considering other such beneficial arrangements, but they would come forward separately.
That's correct. We don't expect that many significant purchases that would require us to come before council. We expect to use this new program for a series of smaller purchases and not anything of this magnitude on a regular basis.
Thank you. I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions before, or we can go to a motion.
Move the recommendation that the tendering requirements of the town's purchasing policy be waived for the upcoming purchase under our computer replacement plan in order to allow the purchase to be completed through a group purchasing plan.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Now we turn to grants and aid, substantial agenda item, as council has experienced during each of our 3 years in office. And I'll just turn in the direction of Mr. Hissick. We've been through this before. If you would like to comment, I'll provide that opportunity, but I think we're good to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So council has received copies of all the grant applications, which total over 62,000 for this year, which as usual is greatly in excess of our modest budget. For this year, our $15,000 budget is supplemented by 3,300 carried forward from last year's allocation from Safe Restart grants. So unless council chooses to allocate an additional amount from those Safe Restart funds, we are left with $18,003 to allocate this year. The only caution I would have is to be cognizant of severing certain requests because of potential conflict of interest, and perhaps we can declare some of those at the outset.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick, and that's where I'll begin. I appreciate Mr. Hissick providing the charts that we have to work with. The first chart has the 21 requests this year, and if there was a previous request, and then we have a separate chart with the history over the last 5 years, which is very helpful as well. And but I would first turn to colleagues if there are any councillors would like to declare that they would be recused on a particular item. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll recuse myself on the Radio Sydney application.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan.
I'll recuse myself from Cycling Without Age Society. I haven't been involved in 3 years, but I have for the previous 3 years, so I might as well stick with that. The Growing Young Farmers Society and the Sydney Guide and Scout Hall Society.
Sorry, Growing Young Farmers. And Scout?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Wainwright, if you wish to recuse yourself on that item, we could deal with Radio Sydney, Councillor Rintoul.
Sorry, I'll recuse myself, Chair from Peninsula Drygrad Society.
Thank you. Councillor Wainwright, thank you. And so with Councillor Wainwright having recused himself, I'll turn to the Sydney Guide and Scout Hall Society. They had a request last year of $1,000. We provided, sorry? Oh, sorry. Is that right above it? No, yes, it is. So these glasses, gotta blame something. So we're turning to Sydney Arts and Media Society, Radio Sydney, and so we have a grant request for $800, and I will turn to colleagues. I think we've seen within the history that we have not had they've been an infrequent applicant for a request, and so we do have their application before us. Councillor O'Keefe.
I'll move that we approve the grant to Radio Sydney for $800.
Second?
Discussion? Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, no, I'll just say, when I'm looking at these things, I'm looking at things that there's a high degree of involvement in Sydney, that something that I think will provide a benefit to a number of people in our community, and things that don't fall, say, under another branch of government or something like that. So I think supporting a local radio station like this is a good fit for our grant and aid policy.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Duncan? No, we're good.
Nothing
Any
to add.
further discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Humble. We'll just await Councillor Wainwright's return. I didn't bring an eraser with me. Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. Council did move to approve a grant to Radio Sydney of $800. Councillor Rintoul, would you? Councillor Rintoul is just recusing himself from the Peninsula Drygrad Society request. We see the history last year. They requested $1,000. We provided a grant of $1,000. They have the same request this year, and we've had a similar request in prior years.
I'll move that we approve 1,000.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Humble. We'll just await Councillor Rintoul's return. Thank you, Councillor Rintoul. Council did approve a grant of $1,000 to Peninsula Drygrad, and of course we've now begun to keep track of how much we're apportioning from our overall amount of $18,300. I would turn to Councillor Duncan. Councillor Duncan recusing herself on 3 items. And we'll turn to the first, Cycling Without Age. Did have a request last year of $2,000. We approved from Safe Restart $2,000. They've requested the same, and they do have a history of grant requests, and the amount has varied slightly.
I'll move the request for $2,000.
We have a seconder.
Second?
Discussion?
I just think this is a really important organization in our community and will be even more so as we come out of the pandemic. Being alerted to the fact of how much isolation people in long-term care homes have experienced and how much it has impacted them and their overall mental and physical health, and how important this of a service they supply to the community for this particular segment of our population. And I think it's going to be critical coming out of this COVID as we move forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the problem is that there isn't enough money to support all of the requests. So at the end of the day, we're going to have to deny some of these, and some of them won't get as much as they asked for. I was looking at giving Cycling Without Age 1,000 and not 2,000, and it's just a matter of how it ultimately shakes out. I would also be comfortable with deferring that until we've, get farther. Like, there are going to be ones, I think, where there is a quick consensus either to approve what they asked for or reject it outright. And then when we see what we've got left at that point, it will start being more challenging. So, this is one of the ones I wouldn't mind talking about it later. But right now, I would not support giving the full 2,000 because it means somebody else on my list doesn't get it.
Thank you, Councillor Wainwright. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe and then speak myself.
Thank you. No doubt that this organization does good things, everything that Councillor Garnett said. The only difficulty that I'm having is that it doesn't seem that they provided any financial statements or budget, and I don't see any evidence that they're pursuing funding from other organizations. So when this first came forward, I was very enthusiastic and willing to support it, as we do with a number of things. But after a couple of years, I'd like to see some effort being put into looking for other sources as well. So at this point, I wasn't willing to support the $2,000. I think perhaps if later in the deliberations after I might consider a lesser amount, but at this time I wouldn't support it for those reasons.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I have comments similar to the two previous speakers in that I appreciate the value that Cycling Without Age has brought to our community. While they didn't provide financials, I don't have a large concern of that. It is a relatively small budget for that organization. However, it would have been helpful, I think, in our discussions to know how much activity Cycling Without Age has provided. And I realize that the pandemic has restricted many organizations in their activities, but having some indication of even what they were providing pre-pandemic in terms of rides for residents in the community and what they're able to do now or what they forecast to look to do would give us an indication of what our grant funds are going towards. I had $1,000 in my calculus. Again, as Councillor Wainwright spoke to, we probably each have numbers that work out to the funds that we have available, and so I'll leave those comments there. I'd be prepared to entertain a motion to amend to $1,000, but I'll turn to other speakers first, and we certainly are free to come back to this at a later time if we wish to do so. So I'll turn to first-time speakers if there's any additional comment. Otherwise, Councillor Rintoul?
I would move to amend the motion to read a grant in aid of $1,000.
I'll second. I would second that.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. I just want to make a note there. Thank you. And so we'll go to, sorry?
That was on the amendment and now on the amended motion.
Yes, thank you. And so I'll look to the main motion. All in favor?
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, okay.
We'll go to the main motion, and is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Sorry, Councillor Garnett,
Okay, I thought we voted the amendment was 1,000, the main motion was 2,000. So if we're voting.
no, the main motion is,
And then it was the main motion is to approve $1,000 for the cycling.
Yeah,
okay, thank you. So we'll next turn to Growing Young Farmers. This is a new request, substantial request at 4,700, and the request for 1,000. Councillor Wainwright.
It's a worthwhile item. The problem is it's a very large amount of money, and I think we should come back to this later on our agenda.
Okay, if I'll turn to other councillors if they wish to comment, but I'm certainly prepared to do that. I'll turn to Councillor Felt and Councillor Keith.
I did reach out to Growing Young Farmers, and I love their program. They're teaching little kids, from seed to produce, and eating the food so that they recognize that food comes out of the ground. It doesn't come on the grocery shelf. I think it's great. My only difficulty I have with it, it's not Sydney-based. They don't have a location. They had been originally working through Sydney Elementary. That program has been taken over by another group, so they're working elsewhere. So I would love to support them in principle, but because they aren't Sydney-based and we have a finite amount of money, I would make the motion that we deny their request.
Okay.
I would second that.
Okay, so we have a motion to deny moved and seconded. Did you wish to comment further?
No.
Okay, I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe, and then I wish to speak.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So I contacted the Sydney Parent Advisory Committee to ask them because I had heard that they had a similar program at Sydney School. So I contacted them to find out if that program is still going. So it is going very well. So as you probably noticed when you go by Sydney School, they have a raised garden beds there. And so the program that they have, it involves all of the grades in the school. They all get time in the garden. They incorporate the planting and everything about the garden into their curriculum. Each class has specific duties to do. This year they've incorporated mason bees as well. And so for me, it sounds like the need is being met within our elementary school. It's funded partially by the Parents Advisory Committee and the school. And that's pretty well all kids who are in Sydney that are under age whatever, up to grade 5, are going to that school. And so in terms of teaching young kids about gardening and how food grows, that's happening at Sydney School. So for that reason, I don't think that there's a need to do that. The need is being met. And as Councillor Fallett said, the application, it wasn't clear to me how they would add more value to what I think is already a really good program happening at the school.
Thank you, Councillor. My only comment before turning to Councillor Garnett is that I appreciate the comments with regards to Sydney Elementary. In the intended use of funds, it does include North Saanich Middle School. $1,000 to purchase of perennial and native plants, trees, and instruct classes. So I do appreciate that a number of their activities are outside of the Sydney area, but our children do go to North Saanich Middle School. So I was prepared to grant a small amount, and given the initial comments, I was willing to move it to a later discussion, as we've done in previous years. Often with first-time requests, we'll go through some of the repeat requests before going to new requests, and sometimes the new requests get a little less, than they ask for. But we do have a motion on the floor to deny. I won't support that motion, but I'll leave my comments there and turn to Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I won't support the motion either, and there's similar points you've raised. North Saanich Middle School these are children that are from our community. And also, there are a fair amount of kids from Sydney that go to Kelson. Sydney does incorporate all of our elementary school children, and I think that the Sandown Center would also be used by many Sydney residents as well. So I think that there would be good value for us, and I would support talking about it later. And this is really important for me because I think, you know, if we teach our children, and you've spoken to, but if we teach our children young about food security, they grow into adults with that knowledge. And so and the fact that Sydney children go to these other schools, it's still a gain for our community. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. Any further speakers? Seeing none, we do have the motion on the floor. I'll call the question. All in favor? We have sorry.
I'll vote in favor too.
Okay, so we have in favor, opposed. We have 2 opposed, Councillor Garnett and myself. The motion carries.
If I could just explain, if we were gonna tie 3-3 on a motion to deny it, the
Defeats
motion
it with
to
approve.
approve is obviously gonna fail, so.
Yeah, no, fair enough, Councillor. Okay, thank you. I'm just, so we're last turning to the,
I'll move that
Sydney
the
Scout Hall?
Sydney Guidance Scout Hall be given 1,000.
Second.
moved and seconded. Any discussion? I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Humble. We'll just await Councillor Duncan's return. Thank you, Councillor Duncan. Just as we're all likely keeping track of the calculus here, cycling without age was granted $1,000. The Scout Hall was granted $1,000, and Growing Young Farmers request was denied. I might suggest, Councillor, Councillors, while we still have several items to consider, I'm sure there may be some that we are considering denying their request, and I would suggest we move that, which will provide a shorter list in the end. Councillor Wainwright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move that we deny the request from Take a Hike Foundation, Balfour's Friends Foundation, and Fata Care Charity.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have moved and seconded. If somebody wanted to separate those, we could, but I'll open discussion on that motion with all 3 requests. Sorry, Councillor Garnett.
I agree with the Take a Hike Foundation and the Fata Care Charity, but I was leaning towards providing a little bit for Balfour's Friends Foundation. Just they are local, and I'm sure that it's not specifics to whether they've actually helped Sydney residents, but I'm sure that the need arises in our community that they'd be willing to do so.
Okay, Councillor, based on your comments, I'll split that, and we'll just consider Take a Hike Foundation and Fata Care Charity under this motion. Any further discussion on that? I'll call a question. All in favor? The motion carries. Thank you. So we'll now turn to Balfour Friends Foundation. Would you like to continue, Councillor Garnett?
Yeah, I was just thinking that I would move that $500 be given to them.
Do we have a seconder?
Second.
Seconder, do you wish to motivate further?
No, I've spoken to what I would.
Okay, Councillor O'Keefe.
Yeah, of course, it would be great to fund an organization that looks after animals. However, I tend to agree with staff's comment or suggestion that this is perhaps out of our scope. I think as a local government, I see it more as a charitable organization, that it'd be more appropriate for them to be fundraising and people who have an interest in that to donate to that. I don't see that it's for me has that sort of wide public benefit that I'm sort of expecting to see. So that's why I wouldn't support the request. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll just add in a comment that I was not looking to approve an amount for them, and I have a note that based on financial need, and I'm sorry, just going through this package to see that again. I don't know if another councillor has a comment on that. Yeah, in 2020, they had a profit of 14,538, and based on the budget of 2021, they had a profit of 41,64. So it is a relatively small operation. Total budget of $47,000. So I'm not sure the financial need is there. So I actually will support the proposed. Sorry, I will not support the request to grant. Councillor Grant?
Just as a point of, that didn't sway my decisions because having just gone through dog surgery, I know the incredible costs that are associated with it. So if you're going to support people who can't afford to get surgeries and things done that are life-threatening, they need to have resources available to fill that void. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor?
Excuse me,
Certainly.
the motion was to deny, wasn't it?
No, the motion is from Councillor Garnett to approve
But
$500.
didn't I make the original motion?
No, pulled out.
I thought we split the motion.
Oh, that's
Okay,
right.
so,
That's right.
So if we split it, it's my original motion to deny.
okay, so, thank you. I stand corrected on procedure. And so the original motion on the floor is to deny the request. I think the comments that we have made all are applicable to whether the motion is to deny or approve, but I appreciate Councillor Wainwright correcting this. So the motion on the floor is to deny the request. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? We have one opposed. Councillor Garnett. The motion carries. Councillor Wainwright, did you wish to continue?
I beg your pardon, as a request, if Mr. Hissick could share his screen, I expect, as opposed to watching ourselves on the video, we could kind of see in real time what's happening with the running tally.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just wait a moment for that. Okay. My eyesight isn't quite good enough.
If you could zoom in a bit.
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
14,500 remaining.
That is helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, continuing, I'd move that the application by Orca Dental Care be denied.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, Councillor Wainwright?
This is, it's obviously a worthwhile thing. And I can appreciate that they had special needs with PPE and that sort of thing during COVID. But council had previously made a decision to move away from supporting this society. And I'm simply looking at being consistent with that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Do council members have any other requests that they might put forward to deny?
I'll move that the Friends of North Saanich Park be denied.
Second.
Councillor Wainwright?
It's a worthwhile cause, but we don't have enough money to go around, and it's not Sydney.
Thank you. I would concur with that and would add additionally that that our staff have engaged the Victoria Green Team and Peninsula Streams, who do similar work in our community, and we do provide support to those organizations to do that work, as well as many volunteers in Sydney. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Are there any others? I have one to put forward, and that is I'll move that Wounded Warriors Canada request be denied.
Second.
Just to speak to that, Wounded Warriors Canada did 2 fundraisers in Greater Victoria in earlier months. I was invited to speak when they arrived on a one-day event in Sydney. Their larger Vancouver Island event, I think, exceeded expectations at a goal of $150,000, and I believe they raised just in excess of that Sydney does participate, Sydney first responders from the Fire and Rescue Department. We do participate in Wounded Warriors, as the Deputy Chief spoke at that Wounded Warriors event. However, I think that given the local requests we have, that it is unfortunately difficult to provide support to that national organization at this time. Call a question, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. The only other one, no, that's it. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett.
I would move that the Mount Newton Center Society request be denied.
Second.
We have a mover and seconder. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett to motivate. Councillor Rintoul. Okay, I'll speak to it, and I would prefer to allocate $500 to Mount Newton Center Society. I do think they provide a valuable service for seniors that some members of the Sydney community would avail themselves of, and so I won't support the motion. Turn to other speakers. Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Wainwright and myself are opposed. The motion carries. Mr. Hissett, could you provide us an update? I know it's not a big change.
Still 14,500 left.
There we go. Okay, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take a run at one. I will move that the amounts to,
If we could go individually, Councillor, we might just wind up splitting.
sorry?
Sorry, you look to maybe possibly making a recommendation of more than one grant?
No, no,
Okay.
just one.
Okay.
But, oh, there it is, sorry. My list is getting cluttered. I would move that the request from Fed Urban Agriculture Society be denied.
Okay, do we have a seconder?
Second.
Moved and seconded, Councillor O'Keefe.
So I think it's great work that they do. However, in looking at their submission, I didn't see that they had any plan specifically for Sydney. In the meantime, I know that there is a group of people within Sydney, and the Rotary, our Sydney Rotary Club, is quite excited about starting a community gardening program. And so I guess I would like to see a local group for us to give funds to that. And since this group hasn't identified any space, it sounds like it's something that they hope they would do in the future, but they haven't identified space or a group of people to work with. So I don't see that there's a point to support it at this time.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. I'll turn to the seconder, Councillor Duncan, and go to Councillor Fallon.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Keefe raised really all the points I would. I know last time I was the one who motivated for giving them this money, so now I'm glad that she's outlined why I would withdraw my support for them this year. I was happy to give them the seed money last year during the pandemic. I think getting this organization more funding to expand the programs they were doing was worthwhile, but I will be glad in future, I think, to pivot to more of the local organizations that now have gotten the bug, and we'll be doing that then.
Councillor Fallon. Thank you, Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. I did speak with the organizer on this one because I was curious as to what they are doing for Sydney, and she indicated that they had about 10 families or 10 individuals last year in the Sydney area that they supported. And I said, how much does that reflect of your total? And she said it was about 10% because they had about 100. She said it was down because of the pandemic. They do their promotions through social media, and believe they are also looking to reach out through Peninsula Rec. So they are trying to promote themselves in a way to connect with Sydney people, but I just wanted to put that one in the hopper, that it is an outside of our area group, but they are looking to connect with local people.
Thank you, Councillor Fallett. Seeing no further speakers, yeah, I appreciate the information Councillor Fallett's provided, and in the report it said that they making reference to 25 planters soil seeds for families and community organizations. Again, that may be the goal this year. I think there is some benefit. We did provide $1,000 from Restart last year, so I won't support the motion to deny the request. I had a small amount allocated, but appreciate the discussion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Okay, we have 4 opposed, Councillor Duncan, Councillor Fallett, Councillor Wainwright, and myself, so the motion is defeated. So we have not denied the request. I would look for a motion to,
I'll move that we give Fed Urban Agricultural Society $500.
Second.
any further discussion? Councillor O'Keefe.
I'll just reiterate again, like, what they're proposing is nothing necessarily specific. They don't have anything organized in terms of where they're gonna do it. I would prefer to have a group come forward that has already talked to town staff, has a plan in place about where we're gonna do it. So just to toss away $500 to hope that they do something in Sydney, I'm just not comfortable with doing that. I'd rather hang on to it and give it to the Rotary Club or some other community group that is actually gonna do something right here. They're gonna build community garden beds in Sydney, and that there's wide support for that, so.
Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Keefe.
Yep.
If I could just, I appreciate your comments. If I could just make a comment of what I think might be clarification,
Okay.
and then open to response from colleagues. And that is, I appreciate the comment you're making with regards to community gardens or raised beds and the initiatives or the interest that is in from volunteers in the community organizations to do that. But I think what this organization is proposing and what Councillor Fallett was speaking to is that they were providing support to up to 100 families before the pandemic. That was greatly reduced during the pandemic, and likely they're looking to try to increase that back to pre-pandemic levels. So I think there's a distinction to be drawn between community gardens and the support that they've provided to families. I'll leave my comments there. I'll leave it open to further discussion before calling the question. Councillor Duncan.
I switched my vote. I feel I should justify myself. As Councillor Fallett has pointed out, that they supported 10 families, and if that was 10%, that is, I would feel bad denying, our role in that organization in that case. I'm not concerned about, they aren't really a community garden organization. They supply seeds and starter materials for individual families, so like container gardening. So I think by focusing on necessarily people who are going to focus on community gardens would be not looking at what this group actually does. So I'm comfortable with them continuing in that capacity, supporting individual families with home gardening. So.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. So we have a motion on the floor to approve $500. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? Opposed? We have 2 opposed, Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Garnett. The motion carries. I'll turn to a councillor, any colleague who wishes to move forward another organization. Councillor Wainwright.
I'll move that Bike Victoria be awarded $1,000.
Second.
I'll turn to the mover.
Nope.
If any comment, or the seconder. No. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe.
I'm in favor of giving them money. I guess what I'm wondering is it something that we could pay for from our active transportation fund? Or does it have to come from grants and aid?
I'll take that as a question through to staff.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. If by active transportation fund you mean the reserve for alternative transportation, that's meant for capital projects, so you couldn't fund it from here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Isick. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you.
Okay. I'll move that we award $5,000 to Peninsula Stream Society.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Wainwright.
Sure. It's not the full amount they're asking for, but it is a significant amount. It's what we gave them last year, and, you know, again, there just isn't enough to go around, so I think it's a reasonable amount.
Thank you. For the comment, I concur with Councillor Wainwright. I think this organization is active in our community, and we've seen benefits, and look for that going forward. I will have a comment arising after this motion. Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I fully support this. And didn't have to look any further than the fish kill event that happened this past year, which I was actually a witness to, sort of, because I was there when the smell was released, and how quickly they responded and how quickly they were there on the scene to try and mitigate it and start an investigation with the federal authorities. And yeah, nothing but praise for how the way they handled it. So, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for noting that, Councillor Garnett. Councillor O'Keefe.
Yeah, and I'll just toss in, also, to me, this is the perfect sort of organization to provide funding through grants and aid. The reasons Councillor Garnett said, the education program that they have for the school kids, you know, their other work that they do, so wide and broad impact to the society, for our community. So, yeah, really happy to support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question. All in favor? The motion carries unanimous. Thank you. My comment arising is that I feel that is perhaps in line with some of the sentiment that Councillor O'Keefe has just expressed, that this unique organization and the value that they bring to our community, I would like to consider, and we don't necessarily have to do it by motion this evening, but we have moved other organizations from grants and aid over the years to a line item in the budget. And I would be prepared to support that. That's not for the 2022 budget, but I might look to staff. Would a motion be appropriate to refer that consideration to the 2023 budget deliberations, or should we just leave it aside for tonight?
Council could approve just adding it as a line item and not identifying it as part of next year's budget. If the next council wanted to revisit, they could do that.
And thank you, Mr. Hissick. And just to note that in the budget binder that Mr. Hissick and staff provide, there is a full page of what the community support levels are for organizations, and we certainly have the ability during budget deliberations to bring any item forward. Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in favor of what you're saying. The only thing I'm thinking is I would prefer to not make a decision now and put it forward to next budget. And the reason being is then we could have perhaps more information provided as to whether we think 5,000 is enough for the sort of work that they're doing. So I would be interested in hearing more from them during next budget deliberations in terms of whether that 5,000 is the amount we want to commit to, or whether there's a larger amount that we might feel more comfortable with. So.
Okay. Well, I was bringing forward the idea because I am comfortable with 5, but I appreciate those comments, and and I think it would be for consideration next year. So, well, I'll make a motion to refer a consideration of Peninsula Stream Society receiving line item funding within the 2023 budget to 2023 budget deliberations.
Second.
So this is a motion rising?
Yes.
We haven't voted on the original motion, have we?
Yes, we did.
Yep.
We did approve it, yeah. Okay. Seeing no discussion, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Councilor Wainwright?
Sure, I'll move that we approve 750 for 676 Kitty Hawk.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we have provided that several times in the past. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Mr. Hissick, could you provide us with an updated total? I see that. Oh, it's in big letters now. 70, or big numbers now, and in red. Councillor Fallon.
I move the Saanich Marine Rescue Society $5,000.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
I think similar needs to Peninsula Stream. It is something that is at our front door. It is an important part of our community. We've been supporting them for years, and I think we should continue to do so.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Garney.
Yeah, I agree, but I was thinking of a little bit of a lower total just simply because I'm looking at how much we have left and we still have other options on the table, so, I don't know if I'm comfortable with the full 5,000, because that leave us 2,250. And I'm seeing some other things here that might require a bit more room.
Okay. If
Sorry,
I could
yeah,
turn to a colleague.
Thinking aloud, I'll
No, no. We appreciate that. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, then Councillor O'Keefe.
Also, it's a worthwhile society. I'd like to give them significant support. The 5,000 I think is just a bit much. I would be happy with 4. Like, that would leave just enough that we could spread it around.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Yeah, if I can make thank you, I'll make a comment, and that is, during Mr. Hissick's introduction, he spoke to that our normal grants and aid is 15,000, that based on our deliberations last year, grants and aid, we had 3,300 unspent, which brought us to the 18,300, and I think there was a caution in Mr. Hissick's introduction that we not look to the COVID restart funds, for significant additions to this year, but I would be prepared for relatively small amounts. In addition, we have just a number of organizations. The reason I say that is I feel the same about Saanich Marine Rescue Society as I do Peninsula Streams. It provides a unique service to our community. Their report is always full has good information. They have a significant need for training that hasn't been able to be conducted to the normal levels during the pandemic, and I would like to support them as they're doing their recovery coming out of the pandemic. And I'll say it now that however this motion goes, in whatever amount, I'll be proposing that it be considered as a line item in the 2023 budget. But let's leave it at the motion that's on the floor. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm in favor of the full amount for 5,000, for all the reasons everybody has said. We're a marine community, and I'm also thinking about the huge increase in fuel prices that they're going to experience, I presume, running around out there to help people. So I'm happy to give them the $5,000, because I think they're going to need it, and I think it's such a significant benefit to our community overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any Councillor Runtoul?
Thank you. Likewise, I'm inclined to support it at the full amount, but I'm very concerned what that leaves us remaining with, and so whether or not there's an appetite to further explore remaining safe restart funds to help. It would seem to me that this is one in which perhaps, as the mayor noted, is perhaps applicable to those funds given the training resources and limitations throughout COVID, and that we could very well, as we did last year, fund this 5,000 out of safe restart. In any event, I'm inclined to support the full amount. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor. It would be from the, sorry, Councillor, a question rising? Go ahead.
No, sorry, I just wanted to clarify, is the motion still for 5,000?
It is?
It is, okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the clarification. Councillor Wainwright?
Thank you, Mayor. So after we make a decision on this particular one, we actually only have 3 left. The need suicide prevention, Sydney lawn bowling, and Saanich Peninsula pipe band.
The Aviation Museum as well?
Oh,
And the
sorry, yes.
aviation.
Yeah, BC Aviation is one of the large ones. If, the mayor's suggestion that we might take a couple of thousand out of the Safe Restart over and above what's been identified, I would be comfortable doing that if it enables us to give the full amount to Saanich Marine Rescue, I guess. So, you know, with that kind of caveat, I'd support this.
Okay, thank you. We'll call a question. All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. And I will make a motion similar to the one I made with regards to Peninsula Stream Society, that we forward to 2023 budget deliberations consideration of $5,000 in funding as a line item.
Second.
Is it moved and seconded? Any discussion? All in favor? None opposed. Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. We'll turn to colleagues on our next. Okay, Councillor O'Keefe, sorry, I'm trying to watch and.
Okay, I'll take a run at this one. Sydney Lawn Bowling. So I'll move that we deny the request of $3,500 for Sydney Lawn Bowling.
We have a seconder. I'm not seeing a seconder, Councillor O'Keefe.
Okay.
That will not make it to the floor. Do we have another recommendation? Councillor Wainwright.
Sure. I'll move that we approve 500 for Sydney Lawn Bowling.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor Wainwright?
We don't have enough to go around. It gives them something. I think they're an organization that, you know, we'd like to keep supporting, but I don't think it's reasonable for us to give the full amount, given our budget.
Councillor O'Keefe?
Thank you. I can support 500. When I look at some of the things that they were using this for, things for like new patio equipment or patio heaters, when I look at that in the context of other needs within the community, I don't think that it's a wide. Anyways, 500 is fine, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay, any further discussion? I'll leave a comment. I won't support it. I did have a slightly higher amount than that. I realize we probably all have different amounts in mind, or possibly different amounts in mind, but I do think it's a good organization in our community, but I'll leave the discussion there and call the question. All in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Myself. The motion carries. Thank you. Councillor Garnett.
I'll move that we provide need to suicide prevention, education, and support $1,800.
Second.
How much?
1,800.
Okay, so we have it moved by Councillor Garnett, seconded by Councillor O'Keefe to grant $1,800. Councillor Garnett?
Again, speaking of the pandemic and what came out of it and what we now know and how important mental health is, I fully support this based on what they're going to provide to our middle school and high school students. Critically important. Can't say that enough. That's basically all I have to say. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Garnett. I'm just turning to Mr. Hissick. So the funds remaining are $1,750, and we're exceeding that with this request, with this motion.
That is correct. There were some mentions of adding to it from Safe Restart funding. So if we overcommit now, then that would pretty much be required.
Okay, so we'll continue with this motion, and I think we have at least one other organization to consider, and after that we will need to move, by default we'll need to move that those additional funds come from COVID Restart. Councillor Duncan?
Thank you. We supported them in the past. I was prepared to give them 500, but I'm not prepared to give them the full 1,800. It's not that suicide prevention isn't worthy cause. It's simply that this organization is kind of downstream from where the big effects are. They're handing out Band-Aids at the chainsaw juggling contest. You know, you actually have to be willing to call them to stop your suicide, and most people won't do that. So I am more for trying to support organizations that are actually helping people with their isolation and giving kids things to do, and kind of rebuilding our community supports that don't put people into that position. So I will be voting against the large amount.
Thank you, Councillor Duncan. I'll turn to Councillor Wainwright, then Councillor Keefe.
Thank you, Mayor. In their application, they're indicating that they're going to use the funding for 8 workshops in our local schools. So I can see if we reduce the amount, they won't be able to do 8 workshops, but they'd still be able to do some. Thing is, they are actually going out and doing workshops. It's not just that we're going to sit back and wait for you to call. So I do think it's worth supporting. It's just a question about the amount. And I would be okay with the full 1,800. I just didn't think it would get support.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Keefe.
Yes, so I'm in support of the full amount. You know, suicide prevention, it takes a multi-pronged approach, you know, crisis lines, education, letting young people know that, you know, this is something that you might be feeling, and how you can reach out for help, or how you can help your friends, or how to direct people to resources. So we don't get the opportunity to support kids in this age group a whole lot, and I think it's a critical need, so I'm quite happy to support the full amount. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole.
No, thank you. I was inclined to support this line, perhaps at a lesser amount, just simply based on the financial information that was submitted by the applicant. Having said that, I think you know, where we're at as a society, you know, lends itself to the likelihood that these services are certainly in no less demand than they ever have been. So I'll support it at the 1,800. Thank you.
I'll just comment that I do support the full amount. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor? Opposed? One opposed. Councillor Duncan. The motion carries. By my tally here, we have one request left, and that is BC Aviation Museum Society.
Sydney Pipe Band, or Saanich Peninsula Pipe
Sorry,
Band.
you're right. So I will turn to colleagues on one of those two.
I'll move grant and aid for Saanich Peninsula Pipe Band, the amount of $500.
Second.
Discussion? Councillor O'Toole.
Yeah, I recognize it's not as much as they asked for. I think it's more in keeping with the amount we've provided previously. In fact, on one occasion it was $250, and on occasion $500. So although it would be nice to provide the full request, I think $500 is reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. That leaves us with the final BC Aviation Museum Society request.
I'll move that the request be denied.
Do we have a seconder for discussion?
Second for
Second.
discussion. Sorry.
Okay. We have, I'll turn to the mover, and then the seconder, and then Councillor Duncan.
I guess, you know, at end of the day, it's a large request, and they're not in Sydney. We do give them money from time to time, but looking at our budget, we don't have any money available, and I don't see why we would pull from our Safe Restart funds to support an organization in another municipality who also have Safe Restart funds that they could draw on. So that's my reason.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett. We'll go to Councillor Duncan.
I actually had a question about this one, because the funds were specifically for heat pumps, and even though they are outside our municipality, I guess this would be a question through to staff. What was our uptake on the money we set aside as like a supplemental amount for people to do heat pumps when BC Hydro was doing their promotion? And if we had money left for that, would that be something that we could use for this rather than having that money that was set aside not be used?
Thank you, Councillor. My understanding is that we spent roughly 10,000 out of the 50 that were allocated, but I don't think it would qualify under that program because it requires an application through BC Hydro or Fortis.
Do you wish to continue, Councillor?
No, no. Oh, sorry, I didn't turn off my microphone. No, thank you. That answered my question.
Okay, no, that's great. Councillor Gordon, no? Go to Councillor O'Toole, then myself.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we've had this discussion before, and perhaps come to a similar conclusion as what's suggested in the motion. You know, I'm quite inclined to provide some funding and to see our Safe Restart funding, you know, be applied to the Saanich Marine Rescue Society, or at least a portion thereof, funding that we've agreed to this evening. And one of the reasons, you know, this is the only grant and aid that comes under the heading of economic development. And the projects that are undertaken at the BC Aviation Museum, you know, tend to attract visitors to the community, and certainly in better days when museums were attracting lots of visitors, and this one's very unique. And those visitors, I think, very often are staying in Sydney at Sydney hotels or shopping in Sydney's retail district. I think it's fair to acknowledge the economic development aspect of this contribution, and I think we all like the fact that they've identified you know, a heat pump for the intended use of the expenditure. So I won't support the motion really on the basis that I would look to move $2,500 in support of the BC Aviation Museum Society as a motion arising. Again, noting that the difference I would expect would come from additional Safe Restart grant funding to be applied to Saanich Marine Rescue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Toole. So we do have a motion on the floor to deny. Sorry, I asked to speak after Councillor O'Toole, and then I'll turn to Councillor Keefe. And that is, I support the comments that Councillor O'Toole has made on that front, but I want to take another perspective on this, and that is, we know that our contribution to the Sydney Historical Museum is, and I will turn to Mr. Hissick, I believe the number is slightly in excess of $100,000 a year.
Including the strata fees and operating, it's closer to 150.
Okay, thank you. Not necessarily, it's helpful to have the amount, but it was more the magnitude. And that is a valuable, that is important and valuable that we maintain that access to a resource to our heritage in our community. And that museum does actually have artifacts from peninsula-wide, because our community actually started, you know, peninsula-wide. And the Aviation Museum is grounded in, or history began at the start of the Second War. That's the reason the airport came to our community, and it was a training base during the Second War, and I think that it's important for us to maintain that aspect of our heritage. And I think our taxpayers would support us in a decision to support that in our community. I'm not suggesting for a moment that it should be at the magnitude that we provide to the Historical Museum, but quite frankly, it's a historical museum as well, and in many respects. And I feel it's worthy to do that. On the comment with regards to whether it's COVID restart funds or not, I will make a motion arising if it's necessary that anything that we've awarded in excess of 18,000 this year, up to 5,000, be allocated because we have to do it for administrative purposes to the Saanich Marine Rescue contribution, because we've already motioned for that to go to 2023 budget as a line item. I don't want to suggest that just because this is the last request, and if we approve whatever amount it is, that it came out of COVID restart, and are we being questioned that this is appropriate use of COVID restart funds? We are using COVID restart funds to top up our overall grants and aid this year. But administratively, we will have to allocate it to some. So I leave my comments there about restart funds, but more importantly, I won't support denying the request. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I similarly will not in favor of denying the request. I agree with Councillor Rintoul that this is one of the only economic development initiatives there. Tourism, it draws in people, and that benefits Sydney, so I think it's worthwhile from that perspective. Also, I concur with the mayor's comments in terms of it is an important part of our history. It's not within our borders, but it certainly was a significant part of our history. And in terms of, North Saanich, the taxpayers of North Saanich contribute significantly to the Sydney Museum. So, well, not as much as us, but they do contribute to the Sydney Museum, which is outside of their borders. So I don't see anything wrong with supporting the Aviation Museum as well. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. It was just the word significant. No, I just want to add, because council may not be aware of it, during the time that the museum was under reconstruction for 3 months, they provided space for meetings for free. So that's also another service they add to the community, and it's something important to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we do have a motion on the floor to deny. I'll look to any further discussion. Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? Councillor Duncan, Councillor Garnett, Councillor Fallett, myself, Councillor O'Keefe, and Councillor Rintoul are opposed. The motion is defeated. Councillor Rintoul?
I'll move that the BC Aviation Museum Society be provided $2,500 in grant and aid.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? Motion opposed? Councillor Wainwright opposed. The motion carries. And so we do see the amount Mr. Hissig has provided, that we have gone $3,050 over the $18,300. I would move that the $3,050 from COVID restart funds be allocated to Saanich Marine Rescue.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Council, for a good discussion and consideration of
Mr.
all
Mayor?
the grant requests this year.
Mr. Mayor?
I will turn to Mr. Hissig.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If someone could please make a motion that the budget be amended by allocating $3,050 from a Safe Restart funds to the grants budget.
Thank you. I so move.
Second.
All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hissig. Turning back to the agenda, we are turning to the monthly building report, item 13F.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion, Councillor Garnett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have some questions for staff regarding on the back side of current month, February 22. I noticed that for 10,502 and 504 Rest Haven, today was the expiry date. Do we know if that is, has there been anything come through, or is that now expired?
Good evening, Ms. Verhagen.
Good evening. Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, my apologies, that was an error on the report. That development permit will not expire until November of 2022. So sorry about that.
Thank you. If I may. Also, with regards to the 95, 66, 70, 74 5th Street development, they're working on site. Have they not pulled a development permit yet?
Again, through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, they are operating under an excavation permit. They do not yet have a full building permit.
Great. And the last question is, with 2313 Orchard, it doesn't show an expiry date.
again, through the mayor to Councillor Garnett, that permit is in the process of being registered. So once it has been sent off to land titles, then it will get an issuance date. And the expiry date is set from that.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll call a question. All in favor? I'm not opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. We'll turn to item 14A under correspondence. We have a letter from, an email from Mr. Green and Mr. Pushinsky, and staff have provided a report.
Move receipt for information.
Second.
Moved and seconded. I will, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll just comment that at their request, I met with Mr. Green and Mr. Pushinsky. I certainly appreciate they bringing forward their views and appreciate the staff response. I think they understand the process better that the town goes through, and Mr. Clary is, Ms. Clary has indicated what a possible timeline might be vis-a-vis the active transportation plan. I'll call the question. All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. And I'll turn to our items of correspondence for information.
Move receipt.
All in favor? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. And a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, staff, and thank you to colleagues. It was a pleasure to do our town's business in person in full with full council this evening. We'll look forward to that in the future. Thank you.